Okay, so I just want to finish live tracing this, and then I'll go back to the other logo, which I'll have to actually draw within Illustrator. So I'm on the live trace options. I've set my corners and my numbers of paths, and everything's looking pretty good. I'm not expecting everything to be perfect. Remember, because I brought in something clean, the amount of noise shouldn't matter that much because I didn't have a lot of scratches or debris. The number of paths shouldn't even matter that much because it should be pretty close to what I brought in. Let's see, but all of them matter in little ways. And that's why live tracing can be annoying. But then I'm going to show you when I return to this, after I've live traced it, I'll show you how I can clean it up and work with it still. So I think the best indicator is this little star in the middle, keeping it pretty clean. That requires a lot of paths. And a lot of corners. That might be about as good as I can get. The shell looks good. All right. So once I'm happy with it, notice there's like little things that are not great that will have to be cleaned up. I make sure ignore white is selected, and then I say expand. And now I have vector shapes. And notice there's not that many anchors, and that's good. That means it's kind of cleaner and smoother. But if I need to, I can use those anchors, and I will, to clean everything up. You know, like that one's not necessary. I can delete that anchor. And I'll get into that when I return to this one. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to keep this saved as an Illustrator file. So File, Save, AI. And this is my composite one. My other one, I'm just going to be working right from my sketch, the achievement badge. Okay, so far so good. Now let's go to this one. Live tracing did not work on this. So you see the big difference in how what you bring into live trace really outputs a different quality of vector. Now, to solve that, I could ink this and scan it and really clean it up. But no matter how well I ink it, I'm probably not going to be super technical at making it symmetrical, right? So the better option is to do what I'm going to do now. So I brought this in. Now what I'm going to do is go to my layers, which is almost near the bottom of these options at the windows at the right-hand side. And I am going to double click on it and click on this option, which is dim images, and I'll just keep it at 50%. This is like putting tracing paper over this layer because this is a raster layer. And then I'm going to, and this becomes very important in Illustrator, lock that layer. So I can't accidentally screw it up. Now I'm going to make a new layer, just like you do in Photoshop, on top of it. This will be a red anchor layer, which means it will show my paths and my anchors in red. And now I can start drawing on top. Now the classic tool for Illustrator is the pen tool. That's why it's near the top. And then your options for Illustrator, you shrink this window so you can see these things. I can close these live trace options. Your options for Illustrator, for color are right here. You have a fill color. It's not foreground, background. It's a fill color and what's called a stroke. A stroke is the outline of your shapes. So how does the pen tool work? Well, I'm tracing now, right? So I can zoom in. I plot an anchor point by clicking with the pen tool. And then immediately it wants to drag out. And if I want it to be straight, I just click again, a new anchor point. It's made for the mouse. But if I want it to curve, I click at an exact point and then I drag. And that gives me what are called Bezier curves or Bezier handles. And I use them to kind of adjust the angle of the curve. Now it's set for fill, so it's automatically going to fill the space where I started, which is a little annoying. So it's not intuitive like drawing. And if you do a curve, it will automatically make the next point a curve unless you change it with the convert tool to a different point, which I do after the fact. So I can find all my curves this way and kind of fill it in and have to fix and convert the anchors later. But it's a really odd process that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And with a lot of practice, you can do amazing things with the pen tool, and that tool's been there forever. And it's not going to go anywhere. How do I clean it up and finish it? I have to go back eventually to the beginning. Okay, so I just made a really complex shape with the pen tool. And I could convert these anchor points in different ways and make curves out of things that were straights before and make straights out of things that were curves before to get the exact shape. Or I can use some of these other tools I like better. So to actually just draw within Illustrator, this is what I call digital inking. I like to use not the brush tool, but the blob brush tool. And what I like about the blob brush tool, this is where the stylus really comes in handy. You double click on it and you can set how smooth you want it to be versus how accurate. All right. You can also set it to be pressure sensitive, which is really helpful. And if you have a better tablet, you can set it to be angle sensitive and tilt sensitive as well. So when I use this, I can just draw with it, and with my pressure, it will be either thin or thick. But instead of being pixel-based shapes that it's making, each of these are vectors. And because I have it set for pretty smooth, actually I don't have it set for very smooth, I'm just that good. But it doesn't make that many anchor points. But if I want it to be super smooth, I can set it more to the smooth side. And then even if I go crazy, it will still kind of smooth it out. So it's as few anchor points as possible. All right, so how might that work? Well, this is more for hand-drawn kind of logo solutions. So I might do this for the eye for sure. I want a dot there, and I want a ring that has a variety of edges, and I can kind of draw it and it smooths it out for me as I go. But I have to always be connected. And all of these are vector shapes which can be changed. The other tool I like a lot, and this is the tool I'm actually going to use for the bulk of this, because we are talking about cutting out from shapes, right, is the pencil tool. And the pencil tool, which you never use in Photoshop because it's just a fill each pixel at a time tool. The pencil tool can also be set by double clicking to be either smooth or accurate. I want it to be more smooth. And what's nice about it is I can just draw one half of this. So I'm going to turn on my rulers and I'm going to use guides, just like you do in Photoshop, to find my center. And I'm going to draw up to the center of this outside shape. And if you think about how would I make this if I were cutting out of paper, I would start by just cutting out this big shape, right? Like a sticker. So let me get rid of these and show you with the pencil tool. What you can do with the pen tool too, but it's not as intuitive as this. So I'm just going to start drawing. I'm not going to worry if I get a little off. Because it can be fixed and smoothed and changed. And once I get to here, I'm going to go a little bit beyond halfway and then go back up to where I started until I see a little circle next to the pencil, which means it's going to connect it. All right, so what did that do? Because it's on mostly smooth, it smoothed out a little too much in some places, right? But in other places, it gave me a beautiful curve. That's quite nice. Now if I use the white arrow, which I call the small selection tool, I can select each anchor point and move it to the right place. So first, I know where all of these little dips in are going to be. And any anchor near tips, I can see where those are. Also with this small selection tool, I can play with the curves, but I'm not quite ready for that yet. And if I don't want there to be a curve, if I want it to be straight, instead of using the Convert pen tool, I can just click on that handle and drag directly down. Now I use the stylus for this. You could do it with the mouse as well. I just think the sensitivity of the stylus is helpful. See, so I'm trying to improve it as I go. So here, this anchor, I don't want it to be a curve on that side. And this curve I want to be out, not in. And then here, I want this to be dragged back. And I don't want the curve on this side, but I do want the curve on this side. And I want it to feel even. So I've got that shape. Now here, I want this anchor to move all the way back to the point. I don't want the curve to be on the outside on this side. I want it to be up here, and maybe just not there at all. And here I want it to be up. And ideally, I don't even want this anchor point, so I can go to the pen tool, look at the options, and get the delete anchor and just click on it. But there are shortcuts for those. So if you're on the most common tool I use is this small selection tool, the white arrow. And I can play with each handle and place it exactly where I want it. And if at any time I want to delete an anchor point, I can just hold down the delete button and it will convert the tool. If I hold Command, it will go back to the small selection arrow. I wish it toggled, but it doesn't. This I want to curve just subtly out like that. And then on this anchor, I want this to go in quite a bit. So you only need one handle to set a curve. And that's how you can have one curve going into another curve, like arches. If you have two handles or two anchor points controlling the curve, that's a problem. So that's why I'll often just drag one off. Because when you make them with the design tool, they'll always have, each anchor will have two handles if you make a curve. But you only need one. So if it changes directions like that, that's how you deal with it. So here you see we have two handles on each anchor. I don't need that. I don't need this one at all. So I drag it back to the anchor point and I set that curve